You are Locked On Nets, your daily Brooklyn Nets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Brooklyn, yo.
All right, welcome back to the Locked On Nets podcast on the Locked On Podcast Network. It's your team, the Brooklyn Nets, every single day. I am at Adam Armbrecht, covering the New York Football Giants on the One Giant podcast. No Doug Norrie, but he's got that blue check mark at Doug Norrie on Twitter, and he's the owner-operator of DFSR for all your daily fantasy sports rankings, FanDuel, DraftKings. If you need daily projections, he's got you covered. We, of course, thank you for making us your first listen of the day, free on all those great platforms that you use, and let you know today's episode is brought to you by Truebill. Truebill is the new app that can help you identify and cancel the subscriptions that you don't want anymore and can even negotiate a better rate on those that you want to keep. We come in Friday night edition, double dose here for the podcast as the news breaks. Kyrie Irving is set to return for the Brooklyn Nets. It came out here, broke by Shams Charania of The Athletic, obviously Adrian Wojnarowski with the bombs over on Twitter as well. We go ahead and just throw it up here before we dive in. Official from Shams. All-NBA star Kyrie Irving has started the process to return to the Brooklyn Nets, sources tell The Athletic. Irving is ramping up and has begun team COVID-19 testing, and this season debut date is still to be determined. Followed it up, letting you know that Kyrie Irving will play in road games and practice at home with the Brooklyn Nets. He is expected to practice with the team in the coming days. So that's the headline, right? We've talked about it in recent days on the show. We've had the rumors. We've done the updates over the last weeks where sources close to, and there was a little bit of rumor and speculation that it could be heading the direction of Kyrie Irving returning as a part-time player. Doug and I were unsure if this was ever going to come to pass, and a lot of that can be because you hear the speculation, but a lot of it has always been where there's smoke is there fire, and we haven't seen the embers. And then, like that, suddenly it's stoked, it's ablaze, and Kyrie Irving is set to return. This is just going to be hitting you with the quick beats here. Doug and I will dive back into it. There'll be, of course, more information coming out over the weekend and into next week as well. But as it stands right now, there's 27 away games on the schedule for the Brooklyn Nets. 2 against the Knicks, which Kyrie will be excluded from, and then 1 against the Toronto Raptors, which he would also be excluded from because Canada, starting January 1st, will not be allowing unvaccinated individuals to travel into Canada. So that would exclude him from those 3 games, leaves him with 24 possible away games that he'll be able to participate in, the first of which, the closest one on the schedule, is going to be the Portland Trail Blazers on the 23rd. Now, I said he's entering into the process with the Brooklyn Nets. He's going to start practicing with the team. So, it's the 17th at the time of this recording. Is 6 days enough, 5 days effectively enough for him to get to the place where he's going to be able to play? That's going to be wait and see, right? Is he in basketball condition? There had been, again, sources reporting that he had been working out, meditating, exercising. So we think that he could be as close to basketball ready as anyone is, whether off of injury or any time away from the game. But it's a wait and see. That'd be the first opportunity, though. Obviously, you get the Christmas Day game against the Lakers and then the Clippers. That represents the 3-game road trip that's coming up. After that, the Nets are back for 3 more at home. And then the next available date would be the 5th against the Indiana Pacers, the 12th, against the Chicago Bulls. And then on the 17th, you get the 4-game road trip. So it'd be the first big opportunity outside of this short date table here at the end of December where you could have Kyrie on the road for Cleveland, Washington, San Antonio, and also the Timberwolves. So those would be the big ones from the 17th to the 23rd, where you could get a real big run for Kyrie Irving in his return to the court. Oh, we'll have to wait and see how that plays itself out. But obviously, we also have talked about this. If you can have one of the best players in the game, it's a good thing. The team is better with Kyrie Irving than without him. The other thing that we had talked about, and Doug really led the conversation on this, because the idea about whether or not you could bring back a player on a part-time basis, is that something you could do? And a lot of the pushback in general from around the NBA and around Twitter was, well, you can't do it. It's never been done. And I think, as Doug rightly pointed out, just because it hasn't been done, that's not a reason not to do it. It just means that it's something that you didn't expect or that you weren't used to, and you have to adjust your perspective to wrap your head around that. And one of the things that we talked about after the last podcast off air was this idea of changing perspectives or mentalities around athletes and their approach to the game. Now, do I think by and large that most athletes want to play every game? We've talked about Kevin Durant's love of basketball after having been away with his injuries. For the most part, yes. I think you love to play football, basketball, soccer, hockey, whatever it is, you want to play every day. But is there a world where some players, as they get older, as their bodies start to break down, as the rigors of an 82-game season become a little bit more daunting, and they think that they can extend the longevity of their career by taking some respites from it? Maybe. And depending, it's always going to be about talent. If you're talented enough, then there's going to be teams that are comfortable with potentially those scenarios. So it's interesting to think how this is possibly the first of more than one scenario where we see players approaching how they want to balance their personal and professional lives. And listen, is Kyrie Irving a unique individual? Of course he is. Going back to last year, we know, and over the course of his career, he is someone who is thoughtful. We've said eccentric, and I mean that as a compliment. And there are stretches where his deepest passions do not necessarily lie on the basketball court. Nothing wrong with that. And there's nothing wrong with an organization like the Nets or Kyrie Irving having these conversations behind the scenes and ultimately coming to this place where they said, you know what, let's get you back out on the court. You know, and it ran through. We're going to get into the filters that it runs through, what it can mean for this team going forward, obviously, and how they'll balance things utilizing Kyrie Irving on the road exclusively. Before we do that, I'm going to tell you about our friends over at Truebill. Truebill, as we've said, is the new app that helps you identify and eliminate those subscriptions that you do not want to be paying for anymore. On average, Truebill saves individuals almost $720 a year. Not chump change, right? There's apps and subscriptions. We've all done it, right? First month is going to be free, and then just $14.99 every month for the rest of your life. You forget. And then Truebill comes along and says, hey, link your accounts. We'll identify it. And if you don't want it, we'll take care of it for you. And by the way, if there's subscriptions that you do want to keep, we'll go ahead and negotiate on your behalf to try to get a better rate. They have helped over They have helped countless individuals save significant money. You can head over to Truebill.com right now or download the app and start saving money today. You will not regret it. What's there to lose other than that empty feeling in your pocket as a few more dollar bills get back in there? So the question then becomes, why now? I think is the next logical step here when you look at the Brooklyn Nets. And I think the easy way to find the answer is to look back to last year when the Nets went out and traded for James Harden. You know, we had on Matt Brooks, who does a fantastic job covering the Brooklyn Nets, also has the Clear Out podcast where he talks a lot of X's and O's around the game. Definitely worth checking out. And we had him on to talk about, at the time, just the scenario and what the outlook for the season was. But at one point, we discussed, go back to last year, Kyrie Irving is away from the team, and the Nets go out and say, well, we can't leave Kevin Durant out there by himself, quote unquote, you know, without another superstar. That was the plan. So they go and do what's necessary to bring in James Harden. And then Kyrie Irving pretty quickly gets himself back onto the court. And you can kind of connect the dots there of, hey, if you're away, we're going to find a way to move on without you. And that worked. Then we saw injuries up and down, guys available and not available. Ultimately, only got 8-game sample size with them and found yourselves in the playoffs, ankle injuries, hamstrings, and then ultimately Kevin Durant by himself trying to overcome the Milwaukee Bucks and coming up just a little bit short. Fast forward to this year now, though. And this is the piece where if you're the Brooklyn Nets, it makes all the sense in the world to change your opinion on this. You're at the start of this season, you come and think you're going to have all three. Then Kyrie Irving steps away for reasons that are his own. Doesn't matter what it may be. You double down and say you also get a mandate in New York City that impacts that availability around being vaccinated or unvaccinated. We know that story as well. But what ends up happening is two things. First, you have the new style of the NBA and the way that they're calling fouls. James Harden has to adjust to that. Takes a little bit of time, but he seems to get there. You also have James Harden coming back from the hamstring injury. And while he's been out there and has been fully playing, the question was, and Steve Nash addressed this early on, saying it's going to take him time to ramp back up because he wasn't able to do any of the offseason stuff that he normally would. Then you couple that with James Harden being known as someone who in the offseason didn't necessarily keep himself in basketball shape. So he's a little bit older. He's coming off of an injury. And he's a guy that usually has to ramp himself up. And the game has not quite been the same that it once was. Now, obviously, it looks infinitely better when you have Kyrie Irving out there as well. But there's a little bit of a concern there. Whether you think that it's something that he's never going to get over the hump with, or just that it's going to take more time. It's going to take 50 games, 60 games, 70 games, all 82 games, right? Whatever it's going to take from a recovery standpoint or for Harden to be the best version of himself, it's clearly going to take more time than they initially thought. That's the first piece. The second piece is Kevin Durant. And now, over these last two games, when you have a number of players going to protocol, the Nets are playing shorthanded, and this was kind of the cap off of everything that Durant's been doing. Playing max minutes, right? Playing 40-plus minutes every single night. Dropping a 51-point performance. It's incredible. Playing 45 minutes in the overtime game to take care of the Toronto Raptors. It's amazing. Still putting up 30-plus points in just 39 minutes over the Philadelphia 76ers. Having all of these rookies around him, there's the excitement and the thrilling style of his play. And yet you also know we're running this guy down. And a lot of fans, and we've talked about it, you just say, take a scheduled loss and get Kevin Durant some rest. The only problem with that idea has been Kevin Durant doesn't want to rest. He wants to win the games. And if he's available and healthy and capable of playing, he's going to go out there and play. And then I think, if you're Steve Nash and you're the coaching staff, as these games move along, suddenly you find yourself sitting there and going, well, we have a chance to win it. So, of course, we're going to use Kevin Durant. And it's just hard to take that hard line of saying, nope, 25 minutes tonight, 30 minutes tonight, whatever the case may be, or you're not going to play tonight. So if Kevin Durant's healthy, he's going to play. Been away from the game far too long. You know that he wants to be out there. And you know that this is just going to probably, you don't know for sure, but it's probably going to be taxing. And are you going to find yourself at the end of the season with James Harden, with Kevin Durant, maybe suffering an injury, a little tweak, whatever it may be, or ultimately just being so fatigued that it costs you in the first, second, or third round of the playoffs? You don't want to risk it. So you have an opportunity now to bring back Kyrie Irving, who's incredibly fresh, and who can come in and immediately start to take the load off of these individuals. Now, the way in which you go about doing it is up to you. You can only play on the road, obviously. Do you think that you can convince Kevin Durant to take a night off now because you have Kyrie Irving out there for you? And you say the road games will be opportunities where Kevin Durant doesn't have to play every single night and we can still feel confident about getting victories, as opposed to without Kyrie and saying, if we don't have Kevin Durant out there, it's going to be a hard lift. You even saw it, and it's not a like for like entirely with the matchups, but you saw James Harden against Houston, right? He did everything that he could to get that win, and it wasn't enough. And it's a one-game sample size. I'm not putting that on Harden. But the reality is just, how can you balance this now, knowing that still, for the home games, you'll be without Kyrie Irving? So that means that the pressure and the lift for Kevin Durant, for James Harden, is still going to be as heavy as it ever was for the home games. But you got 24 opportunities here that Kyrie Irving can carry that burden, and that Kyrie Irving can lighten the load. And every game that you get Kevin Durant or James Harden to only play 35 or 36 minutes as opposed to 40, 45. Every 3-4 games, you're picking up a game's worth of energy, a game's worth of mileage back. And in those away games, when Kyrie's on the floor with them, you also save yourself the amount of energy it takes, the exertion of winning those games. It's not going to be nearly as hard to win those games when you have Kyrie Irving. Because guess what? Teams that want to go and double team Kevin Durant, we've seen the way they've been flashing at him, especially these last 2 games. You're not getting away with that with Kyrie Irving and James Harden on the court together. You haven't really been getting away with it right now. But you're going to be far less inclined to throw those double teams at Durant and say, listen, get the ball out of Durant's hands. We'll live with if Kyrie Irving can make his shots. No, because Kyrie Irving makes all of his shots. We talked all season long about Kevin Durant being king in the mid-range. So is Kyrie Irving, as well as being one of the better three-point shooters when he gets back onto this roster as well. So all of a sudden, it is not, as we all know, it's not the same thing as saying, get it out of his hands, we'll let Kessler Edwards beat us these last couple of games. It's not even the same as saying we'll let Patty Mills beat us, who's been absolutely phenomenal this year. But it's completely different to have Kyrie Irving out there and know you can spread them out across the rotations. You can get Harden out of there, and you have immediately a player that knows on-ball point guard duties and responsibilities, playmaker, scorer, facilitator, all 3 levels, everything that Kyrie Irving is. It completely changes the weight and burden that you put on these other 2 players right now, and then specifically on Kevin Durant. This has been a Kevin Durant or nothing kind of season. And you could not, if you were Sean Marks, if you were Steve Nash, if you were Joseph Tsai, go the rest of the year like this. It was not going to be tenable. And given the situation with the protocols, knowing that there was even going to be heavier lift loads after everybody was healthy, and then losing different players, different components of your roster. So it opens up the opportunity to kind of get yourself into a little bit of a coast now. You did a lot of hard work early in this season. And now here's 24 opportunities for Kyrie Irving to say to Kevin Durant, let me go ahead and take care of this for you. And by all indications, the other little piece of this is, by all indications, this went through all the layers you expected to. Joseph Tsai, Sean Marks, Steve Nash, and then it's even been said, key players. We know the key player starts with Kevin Durant, but it involves James Harden. And we said over the course of it, Kevin Durant has been quoted in post games when asked, yeah, I talked to Kyrie. It's mostly about life things, personal things, and I'll keep that between us. But their relationship has continued on. And as long as from the start of this all the way until the point now that he's returning, the sense has been we respect the decisions that Kyrie's making, which is what Steve Nash and the organization has said. We hope and would open him back with welcome arms should circumstances change, and circumstances has changed. That's it. There's the possibility of the plant-based vaccine that we had mentioned the other day coming out, and maybe that is in Kyrie Irving's plans, and that would then change how the remainder of the season could go if and when that becomes available. We don't know that for sure. But again, Doug has been the champion of this beat. Kyrie Irving makes you better. If you can have him, you want him. And if it's a different version of having him, so be it. Because ultimately, as we've discussed, it's about winning championships. Kevin Durant wants to win championships. James Harden wants to win his first championship. Kyrie Irving wants to win a championship. And this is the opportunity to do so. We'll, of course, highlight and continue to discuss what it looks like as far as him getting ramped back up, being available to play, when he'll start to play, and then getting a sense of how they're going to utilize the home games and the road games and balancing the roster. The good news is these last couple of games maybe lets you know that you do have some young players that are ready to contribute. And in that, you feel like you're not going to have necessarily as big a burden in those home games as well, not just on Kevin Durant and Harden, but even the other veterans, LaMarcus Aldridge, James Johnson, right? These aren't guys that you want to have to set such a high level of expectation. And by the way, Patty Mills gets included in that. He's also 33 years old. As spry and as energetic as he looks every single second that he's on the court, you don't want to burn him out because you're getting a great sample size of how effective he can be, and you want him to be effective when it matters most. So we do real quick here. I just want to cover one more piece about how it impacts the rotations and the roster. First, just going to let you know, of course, about our friends over at Built Bar. Built Bar, as we know this holiday season, is a great way to give yourself that boost of fuel and energy without having to worry about empty calories. That's because it's the perfect combination of delicious and healthy. It's low in calories, low in sugar, net carbs, and fat, but high in protein. How could you go wrong with that? Covered in 100% chocolate, all the delicious flavors. I've been a salted caramel guy through and through. And around these holiday seasons, while you're enjoying yourself and having a ton of fun getting together with the family in the off days, on the in-between times, get yourself a Built Bar. Save yourself a little bit of the weight around the belly if you're an individual like myself. You head over right now to Built.com, and you can use promo code LOCKED15 to get 15% off on your first order. That's promo code LOCKED15 for 15% off at Built.com. Also, got to tell you about our friends over at betonline.ag. That's because BetOnline has you covered all season long with more props, odds, and lines than ever before as the football season winds down and heads towards that playoff picture. BetOnline remains your number one spot for all the sports action this season. You can head over to the new updated desktop or mobile website and sign up today and receive a 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. Just use promo code LOCKEDON and receive your 50% welcome bonus when you sign up today. From basketball, baseball, NHL, boxing, and UFC, right down to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. BetOnline, where the game starts. So last little piece that I just wanted to cover was obviously expectations for Kyrie Irving in his return. What is it going to look like? Listen, typically, players that are this good, they get there, and they get there pretty quick. Could there be knocking off some rust, right? Could there be a 5 for 13, 5 for 14 kind of performance early on? Of course there can be. But once he's ramped back up and once they feel like he's ready for the minutes load, I expect Kyrie Irving to get back into his stride pretty darn quickly. The other element to this, too, is then how it impacts the roster. So we've talked about before some of these rookies and saying, Javon Carter, hey, your minutes really should be going somewhere else. We were saying that before Kyrie Irving was back. Now you're going to say that even more. The beauty of this is now you bring in an offensive player and a unique, incredible offensive talent that is Kyrie Irving. But now all of a sudden, a guy like Cam Thomas that's been developing and coming along here, well, now both he and Patty Mills, they become this second offensive engine that you have. You think about your backcourt now. It's Kyrie Irving and James Harden and Patty Mills and Cam Thomas. You also have a guy like Bruce Brown that you can take advantage of and utilize for defensive purposes. Use him in a lot of different ways, as we know. You also have Bembry, who can play up few different defensive opportunities there. So the mixing and matching here and, on a case-by-case basis, game-by-game basis, all of a sudden it really opens up for these 24 road games that they're going to have Kyrie for. It also helps you when you look just a little bit deeper in behind them. If you like some of these rookies, if you like a Kessler Edwards, if you think that Nicholas Claxton has been starting to open up and unlock a little bit more of his game, having another player like this that is a incredible offensive talent, but also a great facilitator, great at running the offense when asked to, now it starts to open up the offensive opportunities for those around him. And the biggest piece is the benefit to Kevin Durant. You're not flashing double teams at him anymore because it's far different to say, we'll let Kessler Edwards beat us or we'll let even Patty Mills beat us, as effective as he's been. When you run double teams at Kevin Durant and you've got James Harden and Kyrie Irving on the court, it's a zero-sum game. This is why they wanted to bring in Harden last year and get these three players together. It's why coming into this year, they were the odds-on favorite to win the championship. And it's why when he gets back on the court, it's going to be a heck of a task for the opposition to be able to slow down the Nets offensively, let alone what they've been doing on the defensive end of the floor. And that's kind of what's great about this, because you bring back in such a talented offensive weapon and you've stockpiled so much defensive players, defensive talent, versatility. I said Claxton, right? He is now hardened to the role of being a versatile defensive switching big that can pick up anybody he's asked to. If he's leaning into that role and Bruce Brown can lean into his role and Bembry can lean into his role with that little bit of length defensively. And Kessler, I know I'm going to keep saying Kessler Edwards, and Doug will chastise me for it later. But he is the kind of player that has that length, right? We said a little bit of 3-and-D, the Jeff Green kind of mold player that can be versatile in that way too. It opens up so many opportunities. It allows you to lean into small ball lineups because your offense is that much more potent. So you can live with some of the deficiencies and the matchups on the defensive side of the ball. It's a win. It's a win. It's a positive. It's great to have Kyrie Irving back on the court. We can't wait. I'll speak for Doug. I know we can't wait to see him back on the court. And we'll come back in next week, highlight where he is, what the team is reporting as far as when we can expect him on the court, and then retotal up. How many games can we expect him for this season? And what is Steve Nash and the organization saying as far as ramping him up from a minute standpoint, with the other little wrinkle and caveat that Doug and I will get into, which is over the course of this, I do want to make sure we mention it. The one thing they'll have to navigate right now as it stands, NBA is adjusting their protocols and guidelines, moving towards, if you are a player who is vaccinated and you do test positive but are asymptomatic with COVID-19, chance to get you back out there on the floor quicker. Kyrie Irving's not going to be able to do that. He'll be able to play these road games, but because he'll be unvaccinated, if he were to test positive, you're still going to be talking about a long gap before he's able to get back on the court. So that's probably the one thing that the Nets are going to potentially have to deal with should it come up. And we see how things have been ramping up recently with the latest strand or variant of the virus. So that's something that they're going to have to manage. But because the rest of the team, as far as we know, is all primarily vaccinated, even if that were to occur, it would only impact Kyrie individually. It wouldn't impact the rest of the team. So that is the one component of it that they're going to keep an eye on. We mentioned before, there was the rumor about the plant-based vaccine that does exist and is in trials right now. Should that get passed, there's some rumor or belief that Kyrie Irving might be inclined to take that because he is a vegetarian and the animal byproducts that exist in all vaccines across the spectrum, not just this one. If he were to do that, then all of a sudden it unlocks a whole other layer of Kyrie Irving for the Brooklyn Nets. So maybe this is step one of a few different phases that'll unfold over the rest of this season. But we'll be here for you, covering it and updating it. And obviously, this is just great news because Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, is incredible to watch. And the worst part about all of this has nothing to do with the personal decisions of Kyrie Irving and the choices that he made. As we said every time that we've talked about this and fully mean it, those are choices that he gets to make for himself. The only thing that he deprived us of was seeing an incredible talent on the court. And now we're going to get that back there, hopefully as soon as possible. As Doug would tell you, head over to YouTube and subscribe. We just had our best episode to date over there, and it's 100% because you guys are over there. You're subscribing, you're watching it live, you're getting in the comments. We do our best to answer every single one and interact with you. It really has been amazing the support you guys have given us, so please keep doing that. We're going to be doing all the post games over there. All of our episodes are up over there. And we are starting to ramp up about the additional extra content that we want to give to you guys because of how good it's been to be able to just get in there and mix it up with everyone. So the link will be in the show notes. Subscribe, and of course, to the podcast as well, wherever you get those needs fulfilled. No quote today. It's just Kyrie is back. That's the quote from me, one of the all-time great poets. We'll be back again, of course, talking all things Brooklyn Nets basketball.